Here it is, my very next project. The Space Marine land speeder, or storm speeder. I don't remember for a fact, but I think this is Primaris. So I've already done the unboxing video. I haven't seen a whole lot of people putting this together. And I'll be assembling this with an eye towards future magnetization. So I'll probably won't be gluing a ton of stuff together that I don't have to glue together, but let's take a look. All right. Let's open her up. Haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with this flight stand. I've got this flight stand and magnetization kit from the Magnet Baron. And it's got these magnets that are designed for ball joints. Maybe I could replace the ball joint there and do some magnetization that way. I'm not sure, but I'll attempt that in a different video. For now, let's take a look at the assembly guide. So for the magnetization video, I already know there's 3 varieties, and basically that means that the variations are going to be in large part on the turrets, which means that the turret part is going to be where the magnetization is localized. So I should feel free to assemble as much of this as I need to. One of the things that I'll probably try to avoid is mounting these engine cowls and any parts that are going to prevent me from doing a good job painting. And this is one of those pieces that really does interfere, so I'm going to leave that off until I'm ready to paint. It's time to do some cutting. Quite a bit of flashing on this, or there's a lot of this stuff, at least on this part of the model. I know Games Workshop can do better with these supports, so I'm not quite sure why this one has so many of these imperfections. I'm going to do some buffing where appropriate, or some sanding. Time to do a little gluing. When you're putting together these sides, you want to make sure that the parts are very clean. There's a lot of sprue gunk on these surfaces that you're going to end up gluing to. And if you don't clean them off pretty well, you end up with some kind of gaps in here. This is probably true of any Warhammer 40k vehicle you build, but it kind of stood out for me on this one. So yeah, make sure your edges are pretty clean. And should go without saying, but dry fit, dry fit, dry fit. I should also point out that there's lots of places on these parts where you think glue should go, but you know, you lay down the glue and it's a little iffy. So I really do recommend just going by the gluing guide on there. It's gonna save you lots of heartache. Here's an interesting design choice. So you see our Space Marine friend here. He's one of the pilots. He's a guy that sits on the right-hand side. And since I'm building them at about the same time, I've moved his head over looking towards the right. That way I can tell which one he is. But that's really not what I wanted to talk about. Look at this arm joint. It's a big square. And, well, let me clean it off a little bit first. And at first I thought, man, that's pretty chunky. Why, you know, it's unnecessary, isn't it? And then I looked at the arm where it goes. And this seems like a really good idea because these arms need to be in a very specific position. And this mounting system is going to allow for very precise mounting. Something that I wish Games Workshop would do for the Primaris Space Marines, where the arms and their weapons and all that kind of stuff is linked together. This is a great advancement. I don't know if it was intentional and if it was a design element that's going to happen from here on out, but for unipose models, this is the way to go. Chonky pegs and chonky tabs. So this kit has been particularly bad about flashing on the part. It's all over the place and they're thick. I don't know the manufacturing process needed quite this much flashing or quite these thick support. I don't know what the deal is, but this model is just lousy with flashing. And you really do have to get rid of it because it's there's very little tolerance in between the parts. So that's just something to think about. Yeah, so there, it just showed me attempting to fit the part, but failing because of this huge honkin' piece of crap on the model. Now that it's gone, oh, and I found another one right here. And it's odd because sometimes you think they're fine, like, oh yeah, that's going to be fine, and you only really find out it's not fine until you try to put the part together, and then, oh yeah, it's in the way of the seam, so you have to go back and cut it out. here. So yeah, this model's going to need plenty of dry fitting. If you follow the directions, this is about as far as you can go in the assembly process without doing some painting. If I add some more pieces, like I know the next piece here is this roll bar, that means I won't be able to fit any of the pilots and stuff, at least not easily. And you see this console right here. You see that console? There's a ton of detail on there. I'm going to try to do a good job, but to do a decent job, I'm going to have to paint this separately. So we won't be able to do the normal kind of assemble and then paint. We're going to have to kind of integrate these to a greater extent than perhaps we're used to. So these are the pieces that I'm going to assemble, and then I'm going to prime. So most of the hull is put together. There's this top part that doesn't go on there. This front hull armor, I'm not putting that on until I paint that separately. Same thing with the two pilots and the console. So I'm putting it on my little wand here to make painting a little less messy for my fingers. The other thing I should point out is that right there, right here on this front armor panel, I've went ahead and put in some a small stack. It's 2 magnets in here. There's this little cylinder that mounts on this armor panel, and it is just wide enough. I had to widen it up just a little bit with a drill bit by hand. It just kind of went in there and kind of twirled it around, and it was just wide enough to put in some of these magnets. And so this is where kind of the front-facing armament goes. It's not the turret-mounted or the sponson mounted. It's the front-mounted. So like an assault Gatling cannon, multi-melta, that's going to go in here. And the Games Workshop have given us a really neat, easy way of doing that. Now, that probably means I'll have to snap off a post in the actual weapons, but that's okay. They'll be magnetized. And you know, I doubled up. I want to make sure there's this nice, strong hold. We'll probably double up on the weapon itself as well. As you're building your storm speeder, here's a little detail that you might want to think about adding. You don't have to. It's completely unnecessary. But I'm going to give it a shot. Just drill out a little exhaust cone for our missile. You got to be careful here because you don't want to go off to the side, and you don't have to make it too deep, just enough so that anyone looking at it can see there's a hole here for the hot rocket exhaust to come out of. Yeah, it's not very deep, and it's not a big deal, but you know, if you've got a drill and you've got a few more minutes, why not? It's hard to make it exactly centered. I should be making a guide hold, but I have no way of, well, not that I don't know how, but I don't have a really good skill set with this, so even my guide hole would probably be uncentered, so I'm just winging it here. And hope that I'm going in right in the middle. Not a biggie, just another one of those little details to add if you're so inclined. Just smoothing off the pieces. With at least with 40K models, I have found that you spend most of your time cleaning and prepping your pieces than you actually do building the model. It's part of the building process, and it's one that's not necessarily the most important thing in the world, but it does add a cleanliness to your model that you'd want. So it's not going to not doing this won't prevent you from being table ready, but it's not going to hurt you to spend a few more minutes getting this done. I mean, probably not. What do I know? So when you're gluing this engine cowling on, just all you really have the room for is to add a little dot of glue to each of these. Make sure they're oriented correctly and close them up, making sure that you follow kind of the original curve. In fact, it might be a good idea to let them dry right on the model without gluing them on. So they glue on the so they end up drying on the right, like the right width. So you let the shape, the form. I'm sorry. You let the part form its shape as it dries there, without anchoring it on, because that part still needs to be painted in here. So same thing here. 3 dots. I'm using plastic glue, and I'm going to give it plenty of time to set in the hopes for the strongest possible bond. I will say I'm not really a fan of these parts that glue to other parts on the basis of very small contact points. One of the reasons I have had less than positive experiences with the Primaris Marines. There's a lot of pieces that are like this, like the Hellblasters, the Aggressors. There's just a lot of like tubing that looks really cool, but it is difficult to work with. Alright, I'm going to let those dry there. Alright, so we'll start from right about here. We'll sit down. Where's our console? Ah, here we go. I'll add my Space Marines, now that I've given them the little eyeballs. And I'll put them in their chairs. Let's see how they fit here. Remember, I have them looking different ways. So this Marine's looking that way, this Marine's looking this way. That way I know where they're gonna be settled in. No, nobody's driving. Everyone's just looking out. One of the things I don't like about this model is that you'll notice the shoulder pads. They're too tight for me to add the Deathwatch pauldron, or the chapter-specific pauldron. So they're just going to have to go kind of like they are. It's a little on the sad side. With these wings, you want to make sure that you're angling them correctly. The part itself will guide you. Look, it'll show you where it wants to go, but you want to make sure that you don't kind of add it crooked, because I almost made that mistake. So just make sure to add it in the correct orientation. I've already knocked the wings down. You probably need to give these a bit more drying time. We're at the point now where we can start adding these last few details. And so I want to make sure I know which is which. Pretty sure this goes here. Yep. Okay. So I'll add a little dab of glue. So as you can see, I've already painted that a little bit, and that's because I wanted to make sure that I got paint on it before I glued it, because otherwise it could be kind of hard to get into all the areas. But now that I see this part, yeah, I could have painted that after it was added. But that's okay. It's good to know. I'd rather paint it before I build it and not need to do that than the converse. So I'll add this guy. Doesn't look half bad. The last thing I need to do is that Space Marine there is missing a head. So, got that guy. Doesn't look half bad. Painted it up so it looks like he's wearing like a headset, skull cap, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to drop him right in here. I'm not sure I'll be able to get the head in there by myself with fingers, so I'm going to just use these guys, these tweezers. There we go. So he's in the cockpit, he's in the turret now. He's the crazy guy not wearing a helmet because he's a crazy guy. I think there's one more part to this build. Just need to find it. Oh, that's where that goes. So there's this little part. It's basically, I think, like an antenna or something. And it goes in the front of the vehicle. Oh yeah, there's a little thing right there. So just make sure that you notice it's got an angle to it, so it goes only one way. So I'm sure you could figure that out as you're putting it in there, but just make sure it's in the right way. There it is. So the last piece I needed to add to this model. Everything else are just magnetized components. And so I've got some paint on them just to kind of speed my project along. But they're not all, obviously they're not painted, but here are the missile pods. They're a little wonky. There's magnets inside them so that I can do one of these. Okay. So they're a little tricky because they're not really meant to be magnetized, but you have to kind of jiggle it in there. So there's that guy. And there's this guy. Yeah, they're a little funky. They're a little kind of askew. So, just do a better job than me. We've also got these sponsons, which also have magnets inside them, both on the face and here. So on the face is so I can do that. On the sponson itself, it's so I can do that. All right, there's that sponson, and it goes. So one more thing. Obviously, the weapon isn't finished yet. Painted anyway. It's the last talon, and it goes right in there. So most of these weapons are interchangeable, so this last talon I can replace that with this melted destroyer. Just have to figure out which end is. Yeah, there we go. So there's a melted destroyer, and there's the, I think it's called an assault cannon, but it might have a different name. So there it is. So this front weapon, I can swap it between all three. Here, these sponsons, I have the other two variants. So I could use this guy, which I think is the, I think that's a Fragstorm missile launcher, like your aggressors might have. I can replace that with this, which I believe is the Icarus rocket pod. And I can also replace it with this, which is nothing, but one of the variants doesn't really have a sponson weapon, but they included a face. There's a face included in the kit. And so I just made it look like an optic. It doesn't actually have, this isn't actually a weapon, as far as I can tell. So I made it an optic, and there it is. So, one more thing left to do. Here's the land speeder. Looks pretty nice. It's, on its magnetized base, so it's a little unsteady. So this is the completed build. Now I know it's quite a bit painted. I had to put down, like I said, I had to put down the base coat and some of the other colors for pieces that if I mounted, I really couldn't get around and was going to be a pain to paint. So I went ahead and just did that. You obviously don't have to, but I think you'll have better results with the painting if you build it in stages the way I did, and kind of base and pre-paint things. Yeah, it was a pretty fun model to build. It wasn't all that intricate. I think the most trouble was all the magnetization you had to do. There's a lot of options. There's 3 variants in one kit, so I'm gonna have a lot of stuff to store separately from the model. I think looking back, I probably wouldn't have magnetized it, and if I get any more, I will not magnetize them. I'll just get one of each variant, or one of the variants, or one or more of the variants I think I'll use. It is a nice model, though. I really enjoyed building it. Everything goes on the way it's supposed to. There's no weird cracks. I mean, there's a little bit, but it's not Rhino-like. I'm pretty excited to paint this guy. I mean, obviously there's not a ton left, but I think what's left is kind of the heart and soul of the painting. So that's going to be a different video. Oh, there is one more thing left to mount. And that is these missiles I spent so much time painting. That was harder to do than I expected. Yeah, sitting under the wing like it does, it's really hard to see the connection point. Oh my gosh. Yeah, once you mount them, you want to make sure they're properly aligned so that they're perpendicular to the wing, not to the aircraft. So, yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to adjust, but now we're done with the build anyway. So, if you're interested in watching the paint, I'll put a new video, or put a video separately from this about the painting process. Check it out if you want to see it. Thanks for watching.